The sun was just beginning to rise over the broken horizon, casting a pale, weak glow across what was left of the city. Buildings stood like hollow skeletons, their windows shattered, streets cracked and empty except for the occasional rustle of debris in the wind. The world had changed, the world as people once knew it had died, swallowed in the chaos of the zombie apocalypse. But for some, life had not ended, it was only beginning anew, forged in fire and struggle. Among the ruins walked a man named Marcus. His clothes were worn, patched with scraps of fabric, and his eyes carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. Once a teacher, now a survivor, Marcus had learned to trust no one but himself in this new, ruthless world. The zombies, mindless, relentless creatures, roamed the streets, remnants of the infected who had once been human. Their groans filled the air, a constant reminder of the thin line between life and death. Marcus kept moving, scanning every shadow. He was not alone. Others were still out there, trying to cling to the fragile hope of rebuilding something, anything that resembled life before the fall. But trust was scarce, and danger lurked not just in the undead, but in desperate human hearts too. As Marcus rounded a corner, he spotted smoke rising in the distance, a signal, or perhaps a trap. His hand instinctively gripped the handle of his makeshift spear, fashioned from a sharpened metal rod and strips of cloth. Years ago, such a weapon would have seemed primitive, but now it was a lifeline. Approaching cautiously, Marcus found a small group gathered around a flickering fire. There were 4 of them, a woman with piercing green eyes and a scar running down her cheek, a burly man whose broad frame seemed to promise strength, a young teenager clutching a battered backpack, and an older man whose face was etched with sorrow. "Are you alone?" the woman asked, her voice firm but weary. "No," Marcus replied, "but I travel light. I'm looking for others who want to rebuild, not just survive." The group exchanged glances. In this world, survival was an art, rebuilding was a dream many feared to dream. "I'm Elena," the woman said. "This is Tom, Sarah, and Joe. We've been holding this spot for a week. The city is crawling with them, but we've managed to keep them at bay, so far." Marcus nodded. "I've been scavenging supplies near the old hospital. I saw something that could help us." His voice dropped. "A lab, maybe. It had equipment that might reverse the infection or at least help understand it." Elena's eyes narrowed. "A cure? After all this time? You don't think it's just a myth?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. But if there's even a chance, it's worth the risk. We can't keep running forever." Their uneasy alliance was forged in necessity. The world was dangerous, and no one could afford to face it alone. But danger was not only in the form of the undead. The city's streets were teeming with scavengers, some hostile, some desperate, and the undead themselves had grown clever, learning to hunt in packs. That night, as the group settled in the ruins of an old library, the groans of zombies drifted closer. Shadows flickered outside the broken windows. Marcus kept watch, the spear steady in his hands. The survivors took turns resting, each haunted by memories of the world before it all collapsed. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the street. Tom's voice snapped, "They're coming!" A horde of zombies surged forward, dragging their broken limbs and rattling with the sound of decay. Elena grabbed a crowbar, Tom readied a baseball bat, and Sarah clutched a small knife. Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself for the fight. The zombies crashed through the broken glass of the library entrance, their dead eyes fixed on the living. The survivors fought with desperate determination. Marcus's spear pierced the first undead figure's skull with a sharp thrust, but more came. They were fast, relentless. Tom swung his bat, knocking 2 zombies aside, while Elena's crowbar cracked sharply against bone. But one zombie lunged at Sarah, its hands grabbing for her throat. Marcus reacted instantly, throwing his spear with deadly precision. The weapon struck true, and the zombie collapsed. Sarah gasped, eyes wide with fear. The fight was brutal but brief. The survivors barely had time to catch their breath before the eerie silence returned, broken only by their ragged breathing. As dawn crept over the horizon, Marcus looked around at his new allies. They had survived the night, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The promise of a cure, the hope of rebuilding, it was fragile. But from the ashes of the old world, they would try. Because in a world overrun by death, the living had to fight not just to survive, but to reclaim their humanity. That's part 1 done. The first light of dawn spilled weakly into the cracked windows of the old library, illuminating the exhausted faces of the survivors. Marcus sat on a pile of tattered books, the weight of the night's battle still heavy in his muscles. Elena was inspecting her crowbar for any cracks. Tom rubbed a bruised shoulder, while Sarah quietly cleaned her knife. Joe stared out the broken window, his eyes distant, as if reliving memories too painful to voice. "We can't stay here much longer," Marcus said quietly. "The noise we made last night, it'll attract more of them." Elena nodded grimly. "We need a plan. The city is no longer safe for wandering. We either move to a stronger location or risk being overrun." "Stronger location?" Sarah asked, voice trembling. "Like where?" "A place with walls that can hold, where we can gather supplies, maybe find others." Marcus's gaze hardened. "And hopefully, the lab I found near the hospital." Joe finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "A lab? That sounds like a trap. Or worse, a waste of time. The dead don't care about cures." "Maybe," Marcus admitted, "but what if it's not? What if someone tried to stop this nightmare and failed? We owe it to the world, to ourselves, to try." The group fell silent. The truth was simple: in this new world, hope was rare, and even rarer was trust. But Marcus's words had planted a seed, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare could end. They packed what little they could carry: canned food, bottles of water, a few medical supplies. Marcus took the makeshift spear, Elena her crowbar, Tom his bat, Sarah her knife, and Joe clutched a rusty pistol with a single bullet. As they moved cautiously through the ruined city, memories came rushing back for each of them. The world before was distant, a faded dream drowned in ash and death. But the undead reminded them relentlessly of what had been lost. The hospital loomed ahead like a tombstone, a towering silhouette against the cloudy sky. Its once proud facade was cracked and blackened, but Marcus recognized the side entrance where he had glimpsed flickering lights days before. "Stay alert," Marcus whispered. "This place is crawling with them." The survivors moved in silence, every sense sharpened by the constant threat. Shadows shifted behind broken walls, distant groans echoed through empty hallways. The building was a maze, a monument to despair, but within its depths lay the hope Marcus sought. Inside, the group found abandoned rooms filled with medical equipment, rusted beds, and shattered glass. Dust floated in beams of pale sunlight piercing the gloom. Elena ran her hand over a keyboard on a long-forgotten computer console, hoping for a miracle. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed, the slow shuffle of footsteps, uneven and dragging. "Zombies," Tom hissed. "We're not alone." Marcus signaled to hide. They slipped into a narrow hallway, pressing themselves against the wall. Two figures approached, moaning softly, their skin pale and cracked. Elena raised her crowbar, ready to strike, but Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. Let them pass." The zombies passed by, oblivious to the living shadows clinging to the wall. When the danger passed, the group continued deeper into the hospital's bowels. In a secured lab room, they found something remarkable: a working generator humming quietly, powering flickering monitors and scientific equipment. Papers lay scattered across desks, some stained, others preserved. Marcus carefully sifted through the documents. "These are notes on the virus. There's mention of a potential vaccine, something that could slow or stop the infection." Elena's eyes widened. "Then it's real. Someone tried to fight this. But where's the vaccine?" Sarah asked, hope and doubt mingling in her voice. Marcus's fingers paused over a map pinned to the wall, a location marked with a red circle not far from their current position. "This might be where they kept the samples. We need to get there." Before they could move, a sudden crash echoed behind them. The zombies they thought had passed had circled back, a pack now, drawn by the sound of human voices. The survivors braced themselves. Tom swung his bat, breaking a zombie's jaw. Elena's crowbar cracked skulls with practiced precision. Marcus's spear found gaps between rotten armor. But the numbers were growing, and the zombies adapted, pressing in from all sides. Joe fired his pistol once, the single bullet striking true, but the noise only seemed to attract more undead. Sarah ducked under a broken table, slashing at a zombie's arm as it reached for her. The fight was desperate. Marcus felt the sharp sting of a claw scrape across his forearm, but adrenaline pushed him forward. The group moved as one, a coordinated unit fighting not just for survival, but for a future. Finally, they broke through a side door, spilling into the cold morning light. Gasping, bleeding, but alive. "We can't stay here," Marcus said firmly. "The zombies will be back. But now we know there's hope, and a way forward." Elena looked at him, eyes fierce. "Then we keep moving. Together." As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the ruined city, the survivors set out once more, out of the ashes of a dead world, toward the fragile light of a new beginning. The city's ruined streets stretched before them like a maze, each corner promising either salvation or death. Marcus led the group carefully, his eyes scanning for any signs of movement. The map from the hospital lab was clutched tightly in his hand, the mark indicating the location of the vaccine samples was their beacon in the darkness of this shattered world. Elena walked beside him, her crowbar ever ready. Behind them, Tom carried their scavenged supplies, while Sarah kept close to Joe, who gripped his pistol nervously. The morning chill was biting, but the cold was nothing compared to the heat of fear burning in their chests. The city was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Once bustling streets were now silent graveyards. The remnants of a world that had ended whispered through the wind, rustling through overturned cars and fallen street signs. "We need to move fast," Marcus said. "If we linger, more will come." Sarah swallowed hard, eyes darting to every shadow. "Do you think we're the only ones heading that way? Others might have found the lab too." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's a risk we have to take. If this vaccine exists, it could change everything, not just for us, but for everyone still alive." They passed through the skeletal remains of a marketplace, the stalls empty and looted. Suddenly, a faint noise drew their attention, the clatter of footsteps from a nearby alley. Tom motioned for silence. "Someone's coming." From the shadows stepped a young man, ragged and weary, holding a rusty crowbar. His eyes flicked nervously between them. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly, voice shaky. "I've been tracking that lab too. Heard rumors of a cure." Marcus exchanged a look with Elena, weighing the risk. Trust was a luxury, but survival required allies. "Name's David," the stranger said. "I'm alone." "Join us," Marcus said after a moment's hesitation. "If we're going to make it, we need all the help we can get." David nodded gratefully and fell into step. Hours passed as they navigated the dangerous streets, avoiding patches where the undead clustered in numbers. The city's once familiar landmarks were now haunting ruins, a burned-out cinema, a toppled statue, the skeletal frame of a playground. As night began to fall, the group found temporary refuge in an abandoned warehouse. Inside, dust motes floated in the fading light, and broken crates lay scattered across the floor. "We need rest," Marcus said. "Tomorrow we push for the lab." They took turns keeping watch, the silence broken only by distant groans and the occasional skittering sound. Around the flickering light of a makeshift fire, stories emerged, fragmented memories of the world before. Elena spoke of her family lost to the first wave of the infection. Tom shared how he had protected a small group before they were torn apart. Sarah remained mostly silent, but her eyes betrayed a fierce determination. David, surprisingly, opened up about a scientist he once knew, someone who might have worked on the vaccine before everything fell apart. "It's not just a rumor," David said quietly. "There's a chance." But as the fire sputtered, a new threat emerged, the sound of distant footsteps, too many to count, approaching rapidly. Marcus stood, spear ready. "Zombies. They found us." The survivors scrambled to their positions, hearts pounding as the groaning hordes spilled into the warehouse. Shadows twisted in the firelight as the undead surged forward. Tom swung his bat with all his might, knocking back one attacker after another. Elena's crowbar rang sharply against skulls. Sarah darted through the chaos, slashing at the creatures with precise strikes. David fought fiercely, surprising everyone with his agility. Marcus moved like a shadow, spear piercing through the decayed flesh of the relentless dead. The battle was brutal, desperate, but the survivors held their ground. Slowly, the tide turned. The last of the zombies fell silent, collapsing in heaps. Breathing heavily, Marcus looked around at his companions. They were battered but alive. "This fight, it's far from over," he said. "But we're stronger together." As dawn broke once more, the group prepared to continue their journey toward the lab, their only hope for a new beginning. The dawn broke, casting a muted orange glow over the ravaged city. The survivors stirred inside the warehouse, still weary from the night's fight but determined to press forward. Marcus scanned the faces around the flickering fire, noting the mix of hope and exhaustion in their eyes. David was already poring over the worn map, tracing their route with a finger. "The lab's just a few miles from here," he said quietly. "But the road is risky, there's a bridge we'll have to cross, and it's unstable." Elena frowned. "A bridge? Over what?" "Over the river that cuts through the city. It's the fastest way, but also the most dangerous." Marcus rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "We don't have time to take the long way. If the vaccine is real, others might beat us to it." Tom, sharpening his bat on a piece of concrete, nodded. "We stick to the plan, but we stay alert." Sarah, still silent but watchful, scanned the dark corners of the warehouse as if expecting more trouble to come. Before they set out, Marcus pulled David aside. "How do we know we can trust you?" David's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Marcus saw something: hesitation, guilt. "I lost people too," David admitted. "I'm not here to cause trouble. We all want the same thing." Marcus nodded but didn't lower his guard. In this world, trust was earned, not given. The group packed their meager supplies and left the relative safety of the warehouse. The city outside was waking to a grim new day, abandoned cars lined the streets, and the distant groans of the undead echoed like a haunting melody. The walk to the bridge was tense. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking danger. Every creak of debris set their nerves on edge. When they reached the river, the bridge loomed overhead, a skeleton of rusted metal and cracked concrete. A thick fog curled over the water, muffling sounds and obscuring vision. Marcus tested the first step, the metal groaned but held. They moved carefully, each step measured, each breath held. Halfway across, a sudden crack echoed sharply. Elena froze, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Before anyone could react, the bridge trembled violently. Pieces of concrete gave way, and a section behind them collapsed into the dark water below. Panic surged. Joe stumbled, nearly falling into the river, but Marcus grabbed him just in time. "Keep moving," Marcus urged, heart pounding. The survivors pressed forward, adrenaline fueling their every step. The bridge quaked again, forcing them to sprint the last few yards. Safely on the other side, they collapsed, gasping for air. The bridge behind them was now little more than a twisted ruin. "That was too close," Sarah said, voice shaky. David looked at Marcus, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. "We're not the only ones heading this way. Others might have set traps, hoping to slow anyone who comes after the vaccine." Marcus's jaw clenched. The stakes were higher than ever. As they made their way into the outskirts of the city's industrial district, the survivors spotted movement ahead, a small group of armed people, their faces hardened by survival. "Wait," Marcus whispered. "We don't know if they're friend or foe." David raised his hands. "Maybe they can help." The strangers noticed them and stepped forward cautiously. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar across her cheek, spoke first. "We're looking for the same thing, the lab. Heard rumors of a cure." Marcus studied her carefully. "What's your name?" "Kara," she said. "And this is my team." They exchanged wary glances. Marcus knew alliances could turn as fast as the wind in this broken world. "Why should we trust you?" Elena asked, voice steady but skeptical. Kara smiled thinly. "Because right now, we have a common enemy, the undead. And because if we don't work together, none of us will survive." The group huddled briefly to discuss. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Trust was fragile, but so was hope. "We'll travel together, for now," Marcus decided. "But any sign of betrayal, and this ends." The combined group moved cautiously through the industrial ruins. The air smelled of rust and decay, but also possibility. As night fell, they camped near an old factory. Around the fire, stories mixed with plans and warnings. Kara's team shared what little intelligence they had, rival groups scavenging aggressively, areas heavily infested with the undead, and reports of a safe haven far beyond the city. Marcus listened, absorbing every detail. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but with new allies, their chances had improved. Yet beneath the surface, unease simmered. The fragile alliance was a ticking clock, one wrong move could shatter it all. That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of the factory. The weight of leadership pressed down on him harder than ever. In this world, survival was not just about fighting the undead, it was about navigating the shadows of trust and betrayal. And the greatest battle was yet to come. The factory's cold walls seemed to close in around them as the survivors sat in uneasy silence. Marcus studied the faces around the fire, both his old group and the newcomers from Kara's team. Despite the warmth of the flames, a chill of suspicion lingered in the air. David sat near Marcus, whispering low, "I don't fully trust them. Something's off." Marcus nodded slowly. "We can't afford blind trust. But right now, they're our best shot." Kara's team was cautious too, watching Marcus's group with equal suspicion. Each person understood that in this world, alliances were fragile and could shatter at the slightest provocation. As the fire crackled, Marcus took a deep breath. "Tomorrow, we reach the lab. It's not just about the vaccine, it's about reclaiming a future." The next morning broke gray and misty. The two groups prepared to move out, gathering what little supplies they had left. Marcus checked his gear carefully, weapons, map, the precious vial David had recovered from a previous run. It wasn't the vaccine itself, but a sample that might lead them there. The journey to the lab was perilous. The streets were littered with the remnants of chaos, burned-out cars, overturned carts, and eerie silence broken only by distant groans. As they moved, Kara pulled Marcus aside. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. "We have a traitor in our group." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Before Kara could answer, a sudden shout broke out behind them. "Zombies!" Tom yelled, dropping his pack and grabbing his bat. From the shadows, a shambling horde emerged, groaning and swaying toward them. The two groups sprang into action, a chaotic blur of weapons, shouts, and desperate swings. Elena's crowbar cracked against skull after skull. Sarah fired her pistol with precision, taking down the nearest attackers. Marcus lunged forward with his spear, his movements fluid and deadly. The fight was brutal but brief, the survivors fought with every ounce of strength, refusing to be overwhelmed. When the last undead collapsed, the group exhaled heavy breaths, adrenaline still pumping. But the victory was short-lived. Marcus spotted Kara's eyes scanning the survivors, her gaze lingering suspiciously on David. "What's going on?" Marcus demanded. Kara hesitated, then said, "We found evidence that someone has been stealing supplies, sabotaging our efforts. And it points to someone in your group." David stiffened. "That's not true." Marcus turned to David, searching for any sign of betrayal. Before he could ask more, Joe suddenly staggered back, clutching his arm. "It's infected," Sarah said, rushing to his side. Marcus's heart sank. "How?" Joe's face twisted with pain. "I don't know, maybe a scratch during the fight." Panic rippled through the group. Kara's team moved quickly, isolating Joe and preparing a safe place for him. But Marcus knew the grim truth: infection meant inevitable transformation. The group's fragile trust shattered further. David pulled Marcus aside again. "We need to act fast. If Joe turns, it could cost us everything." Marcus nodded grimly. "I'll do what's necessary." That night, as Joe's breathing grew shallow, Marcus stayed by his side. "I'm sorry," Joe whispered. "I wanted to help." Marcus's eyes burned with pain. "We'll carry on, Joe. For you." With a heavy heart, Marcus made the impossible decision. As dawn crept over the ruined city, Joe's eyes glazed over, and the change began. Marcus stood, spear ready, his hands steady despite the storm inside. The fight was swift, merciless, and necessary. Afterward, the survivors mourned quietly, the weight of loss heavy in the air. Kara approached Marcus. "We can't afford weakness." "Not now." He looked at her, understanding the harsh truth. "Agreed. But we need to watch each other too." The search for the traitor intensified. Suspicion poisoned every interaction. One by one, small betrayals surfaced: missing supplies, whispered secrets, unexplained absences. Tensions rose until the inevitable confrontation. David was found with stolen ammunition hidden in his pack. "I did it for survival," he confessed bitterly. "Not to betray anyone." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Survival doesn't excuse betrayal. You put us all at risk." With heavy hearts, they decided David could no longer stay. As he disappeared into the shadows, the group felt the cost of their broken trust. But the lab still awaited. The vaccine was still within reach. And the chance to rebuild, out of the ashes, still burned faint but alive. The morning air was thick with a mixture of fog and unease as the group pressed onward toward the lab. Each step forward felt heavier, not just because of the weight of their packs, but because the shadows of recent betrayals and loss clung to their minds. Marcus led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the cracked pavement and skeletal trees lining the path. The quiet was deceptive. The faint groans and rustling could erupt into chaos at any moment. "We're close," Kara said, pointing to a crumbling building partially obscured by vines and rubble. "That's the lab." The group approached cautiously, every muscle tense. The building loomed like a forgotten monument, its windows shattered and walls stained with years of decay. But something about it still radiated purpose, hope buried beneath the ruin. Marcus pushed open the heavy door, which groaned on its hinges. Inside, the air was stale, and dust motes floated through beams of weak sunlight. David's absence was felt more keenly here, his knowledge of the lab's layout had been invaluable. But the group had no choice but to rely on fragments of information they'd gathered. They moved through darkened hallways, the silence punctuated only by their footsteps and the occasional drip of water. Elena ran her hand along a dusty console, wiping away grime to reveal flickering screens. "There's power, but it's unstable." Sarah knelt by a cracked vial labeled experimental serum. She carefully lifted it. "If this is the vaccine, it's fragile. We have to be careful." Kara examined a metal cabinet, opening it to reveal stacks of papers and notebooks, research logs, experimental data, and notes that painted a picture of desperate hope before the world fell apart. Marcus took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of what lay before them. Suddenly, the building trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a distant rumble echoed through the halls. "Earthquake?" Joe asked, eyes wide despite his recent loss. "Or something worse," Marcus muttered, gripping his spear tighter. They hurried toward the main laboratory, the heart of the building, where the vaccine was supposed to be developed. As they entered, a cold draft swept through, and a faint humming noise filled the space. Machines flickered on and off, some still functional despite the decay. David's notes indicated that the vaccine required specific environmental conditions to remain stable. The power here was the key. Sarah connected a portable battery to one of the machines. Lights brightened. A small monitor displayed vital signs and chemical reactions. "It's working," she whispered. We might be able to synthesize the vaccine here. Marcus allowed himself a flicker of hope. But the moment was shattered by a sudden crash from the corridor outside. Weapons drawn, the group moved quickly to investigate. They found a pair of figures struggling, one a survivor, the other a reanimated undead who had somehow gotten inside. Tom lunged, bat swinging, knocking the creature down before it could attack again. Breathing hard, the survivor looked up, fear in his eyes. "Please, help me." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Who are you? How did you get here?" The man's voice trembled. "My group was attacked. I ran. I need help, the vaccine, it's our last hope." Kara exchanged a look with Marcus. Their group was stretched thin, but could they risk trust once more? Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "You're in." The man introduced himself as Leo, and he carried news that unsettled everyone. Rival survivor groups were closing in, desperate to seize the vaccine at any cost. That night, as the survivors barricaded the lab, tension thickened. Each creak or distant moan could signal an attack. Marcus gathered the group. "We have the means to rebuild, but only if we hold this ground." Sarah worked tirelessly to stabilize the vaccine samples, while Elena and Tom set traps around the building. Outside, shadows shifted. The enemy was coming. And in the dim light of the lab, hope flickered like a fragile flame. The night was thick with a suffocating silence, broken only by the faint hum of machines and the occasional groan of shifting rubble. Inside the battered lab, the survivors moved like shadows, their every step measured and cautious. The flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shapes against cracked walls, reminding them that even here, safety was fragile. Marcus stood at the forefront, spear in hand, eyes sharp. The news Leo had brought weighed heavily on him. Rival groups were closing in, and they wouldn't hesitate to take the vaccine by force. He glanced at Kara, who was checking the barricades near the entrance, her face set in grim determination. "They'll be here before dawn," she whispered. "Then we prepare," Marcus said. Throughout the night, each member of the group took their position, weapons ready, nerves taut. Sarah kept working on the vaccine synthesis machine, the small green light blinking steadily as if defying the chaos around them. Every so often, she glanced up, anxiety flickering across her face. The silence was shattered by a distant crash, the sound of heavy footsteps and angry shouts echoing through the ruined streets. Marcus's heart pounded as shadows emerged from the darkness, a ragged band of hostile survivors, armed and ruthless. "Move!" Marcus barked, rallying his group. The attackers surged forward, crashing against the barricades with brute force. Elena swung her crowbar, knocking down anyone who breached the entrance. Tom, wielding his bat like an extension of himself, fought fiercely to hold the line. Zombies, drawn by the noise, lurched toward the battle, their moans adding a horrifying chorus to the chaos. Inside the lab, Kara and Marcus coordinated the defense. "Keep the vaccine safe," Kara shouted. But as the fight dragged on, exhaustion set in. Their ammunition was running low, and the relentless waves of enemies pushed them to the brink. Marcus found himself face to face with the leader of the rival group, a cold-eyed man named Voss, who sneered with cruel satisfaction. "You think this vaccine will save you?" Voss spat. "It belongs to whoever is strongest now." Their weapons clashed in a brutal duel, every strike heavy with desperation. Marcus's spear grazed Voss's side, but the man's knife found a shallow cut on Marcus's arm. Blood dripped, but Marcus refused to falter. Behind him, the fight raged on, allies falling, the undead closing in, hope slipping through their fingers. Just when it seemed the enemy would overwhelm them, Sarah's voice rang out from the lab's inner chamber. "I've stabilized the vaccine. It's ready." A surge of renewed energy coursed through the group. They pushed back fiercely, driven by the chance to reclaim the future. Voss growled, realizing his advantage slipping, and signaled retreat. As the rival group vanished into the shadows, the survivors collapsed in exhaustion. Marcus looked at his battered group, pride mingled with sorrow. "We held the line. But this fight is far from over." Kara nodded. "We have what we came for." Now we must rebuild. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the ruined city, casting a pale glow on a world forever changed. The survivors had won this battle, but the war for the future was just beginning. Let me know when you're ready for Part 8. Part 8, A New Dawn. The sun rose slowly over the shattered skyline, painting the remnants of the city in a warm, golden hue. It was a stark contrast to the bleakness the survivors had endured. The fight for the vaccine, for survival, had left scars on each of them, physical wounds and deeper marks on their souls. Marcus stood on the rooftop of the lab, gazing out at the horizon. The sprawling ruins seemed endless, but somewhere beyond, he knew, lay the possibility of rebuilding, of hope. Beside him, Kara loaded the last of their salvaged supplies into a makeshift container. "We did it," she said quietly. "Against all odds." Marcus nodded. "But it's only the beginning." Inside the lab, Sarah carefully packed the stabilized vaccine into secure cases, her hands steady despite the exhaustion. Elena and Tom checked the perimeter one last time, vigilant against any lurking dangers. "We'll need a base," Marcus said, joining them. "A place to protect what we've fought for, and to help others." Kara smiled faintly. "The factory we first took shelter in, it's defensible. We can fix it up." As the group began to organize, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. The nightmare of the apocalypse wasn't over, but they had a weapon against it now. Outside, the city stirred. Survivors, some cautious, others desperate, began to emerge from hiding places. Word would spread of the vaccine's discovery, and with it, a flicker of hope. But with hope came new challenges. Marcus gathered the group to discuss the next steps. "We have the vaccine, but it's fragile and limited. We need to find others who can help produce and distribute it safely." Leo, who had proved his loyalty through the trials, stepped forward. "There are other survivor communities. Some have resources. We should reach out." Sarah added, "We'll need to train more people, scientists, guards, medics. It's not just about fighting anymore." Marcus looked around at the faces illuminated by the morning light. They were weary, marked by loss, but alive. And together, they were the spark of something new. Just as plans were forming, a sudden noise from the street below caught their attention, a rumble, the distant growl of undead. "Zombies," Elena said, tension snapping back into her voice. "They're moving closer." Marcus's grip tightened on his spear. "We've cleared this area before, but the threat never ends." Kara nodded. "We'll need to set stronger defenses. The past won't stay buried." As they prepared once more to defend their fragile sanctuary, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world had fallen apart, but from the ashes, they would build something stronger. Something worth fighting for. The battle for survival was far from over, but this time, they had a chance to win, not just to live, but to rebuild. And as the sun climbed higher, casting light on a broken world, the survivors stepped forward, united, determined, and ready to face whatever came next. That's the full 8-part outline with detailed, engaging parts, each about 795 words for your audiobook series. If you want, I can help with titles, photo prompts, or even scripts based on these parts.